And hopefully, we're not the only ones here tonight that feel that same way. I hope everybody's doing great tonight. BT here, coming to you live from Brunson, South Carolina. How's everybody doing tonight? I hope everybody's having a interesting week so far. We got Thursday, April 30th. We got the full moon coming up tomorrow night, just in case anybody's wondering. Good time to manifest and put your intentions out there for positive energy. So tonight we're going to talk about state constitutions and we're going to go over some stuff and how state constitutions actually came about. And so we're going to be going through a book of mine that is about American government. It was written in 1931 and it's the consideration of the problems of democracy, okay? And so again, we have democracy, which is corporatism. Then we have the republic, which is of we the people. So again, this is going to be dealing with Frank Abbott, and he's a PhD person out of Oregon State, which is kind of interesting since Oregon State's gone woke. But back in the day, I guess they were pretty strong in the Republican area. Okay. So, state constitutions. I'm just going to start doing some reading here and just go ahead and just kind of listen. And if you want to go ahead and interject here after we're done with all this stuff, feel free to go ahead and do so. Okay. The origin of a state constitution. As the result of the Revolutionary War, the 13 colonies of North America became 13 independent states. Each had a power to enact such laws as it considered wise. As expressed by a meeting of New Hampshire towns, it is our humble opinion that when the Declaration of Independence took place, the colonies were absolute in a state of nature. In other words, nature's law. And the powers of government reverted to the people at large. In other words, we the people controlled government. Thus, the people of each state had the power to create any kind of government that they preferred. Connecticut and Rhode Island found the colonial charters granted to them by Charles II to be so liberal, and these charters were so sufficient for their purposes. Okay, so think of this: Connecticut and Rhode Island was a liberal constitutional background. Okay, these states merely renounced their allegiance to the King of England and continued to be governed according to the provisions of their charters until 1818 and 1842. Between 1776 and 1780, all the other states prepared new documents known as constitutions. In addition to the outlining a form of government, these documents contain certain rules to which all state legislation must conform. These original constitutions were framed by state conventions or congresses, some of which were composed of members of the state assemblies, while others were specially constituted for that purpose. All of our state constitutions now exist in existence were framed by assemblies representing the people. Congress never admits a new state into a union until the territory desiring to be admitted has framed its constitution. In other words, every state had to have a constitution prior to actually becoming a state. On the admission of some states, Congress has passed an act empowering the people of a territory to hold a convention and to frame a constitution. On the admission of the other states, Congress has accepted and confirmed the constitution previously drawn up by the territorial convention. In other words, of any state that came to mind and came to become a state, they created their constitution, and then Congress basically voted on it to make sure it was in line with the United States of America's Constitution. Okay. The state constitution and how they're analyzed. Okay. There's actually 6 parts to the Constitution. Now, the first is the preamble, stating the general purpose for which the government is organized. 2, a Bill of Rights, listing certain rights which must not be infringed upon by enactments of legislatures. Okay, in other words, if the legislator who creates the laws and statutes and ordinances, okay, within the state, they couldn't be in any conflict with the United States of America's Constitution. Okay. Number three, provisions from the organization of the legislative, executive, and judicial departments and the powers and duties of each. So again, we have three branches of government, okay? So they had to be formed within this state constitution. Four, provisions of a miscellaneous character treating of such subjects as suffrage and elections, revenues and expenditures, local government, public education, and railroads, and any other form of corporations. Number five, provisions for future changes by partial amendment or total revision. Okay. So I'm going to kind of stop there for a second because South Carolina and a lot of other states had had multiple revisions done to the original Constitution. There's very few states that actually still maintain pretty much the majority of the original Constitution. Okay. And again, it's all been changed and doctored up through time to create more power within the legislative Congress branch so that way they can control the corporate status and be able to tax and do the things that were basically what we fought about to be able to come to this type of a republic form of government. So everything that they were doing was going against what we were meant to be. The next area is schedule, providing for such matters as submitting the new Constitution to the voters and putting it into operation without conflicting with the previous Constitution. Okay, so again, when they amend it, it has to go to the voters to see if that's going to be okay. And then once it's amended, then it goes back to the state in legislative branch to be able to determine if they're going to go ahead and rule for it or rule against it. And that's basically how it works. Now, the revision of state constitutions is a provision that state constitutions cannot be changed by state legislators in the same manner that ordinary laws are changed. However, since that time, it's been changed in a lot of different states. Okay. Again, this was written back in the 1930s. Okay. So we've come a long way since that time. Basically, the altering of the old Constitution and forming new Constitution that have more of a violation of your unalienable, inalienable rights. And so that's kind of how we look at it. If the people desire to make any changes in a constitution, a convention is called to revise the old constitution. So, how many states have actually had a constitutional convention prior to changing their own constitution? Food for thought, okay? Now, another area is in that aspect of the Constitutional Convention. Constitutional conventions is an assembly of delegates chosen by the voters to revise an old constitution to frame a new one. So think about this, okay? If South Carolina or whatever state that you live in wanted to change their constitution, we would have to form some delegates that would go in and look at the original constitution that we're changing or the one that's already been changed from the original. And then we would reframe it according to what we felt, according to the numbers. Okay, it'd have to be a majority. Everybody would have to be in agreement. And then we could go ahead and get those types of things changed. Okay, all states except for Rhode Island, the Constitution may be changed by convention. Okay, so back in the day, Rhode Island didn't care. They're like, no, we're not going to do that. Because again, remember, we're looking at areas that are more liberal. Okay. Connecticut and Rhode Island are very liberal back in the day. Okay. So they didn't feel that a convention had that type of authority. Okay. They wanted to be able to control those things. Now, there's usually three popular votes connected with a new or revised constitution. The vote of the people authorizing a convention. Two, the election by the voters of delegates to the convention. And three, the submission to the people for approval of the Constitution framed by the convention. Now, over the years, we've had many forms of a constitutional convention that was created by the people, and they all come together and they have delegates from every state and things of this nature to try to look at the reasons why we're having so much difficulty through these decades of change. And when it has happened and they've come to the conclusion and they bring this back to the states have pretty much just basically just, turned their shoulder to these types of conventions. So we have to be able to reinstate those type of conventions that allow the general population of we the people, the lawful citizens, okay, the lawful Americans, okay, because again, there's two forms, okay, citizens are of the commercial status and Americans are of the national status, okay? So we have to be able to get these areas taken care of where we can actually fix different constitutions in each state that have been usurped and given powers where the general population have had the inability to change due to these powers that control. And that's one of the things that we're going through right now as we look at all the things that are happening with political arena that we see today, okay? And when I say the political arena, I mean everything, both the Republican side, the Democratic side, the independent side, all the sides that are playing different roles within this movie that we're in. Okay. And when I say it's a movie, it really is a movie taking place for those of you who are awakened. And for those who are not awakened, are having difficulties within these transitions of what's happening and what's going on. And so we have to have that ability to remember not to get so tied up into everything. Trump's always, referring to central casting. Central casting is what we see a lot of. Okay. So again, remember that a majority of these individuals who we see today are just playing a role within Congress and Senate and all these other areas that are conflicting with what we, the people, really truly desire and want to have accomplished as a republic form of government. Okay. So when we look at partial amendments, all states except New Hampshire, the Constitution may be changed by a partial amendment, which method is used by only a few alterations which are made. In other words, they're not redoing the whole entire Constitution, they're just changing a few areas, okay? And so one of the things that I think every state constitution needs to have changed is the verbiage within the preamble or within the actual Constitution itself, which states alienable rights. So inalienable rights. Because again, inalienable rights can be sold or transferred. And that's what's happened to the living man having their name converted in all capital letters into that transfer, that sold us in that commercial status of government. Okay. So I think that should be all changed back into unalienable. In other words, God's given rights, nature and rights. Okay. So as we move forward, the amendments must be done by affirmative vote. Okay. They also have to have a confirmation by a vote of the people, as well as the legislator and approved by the voters. Okay. The requirements are an affirmative vote by two successive legislators for the proposal of the amendment. In other words, it takes two people to bring it out into the floor. Okay. Limitations. Okay. Now, in some cases, as we look at government, they bring in all these different types of papers and rules and regulations and amendments and this and that. This is very simple, okay? It's a limitation, okay? The frequency and the character of the proposals. In other words, we just don't throw a bunch of different amendments out there. We're very, precise in what we want to be able to accomplish, okay? Now, when we look at it from another area, the unrestricted proposal of amendments, okay, they're done through the adoption by the vote of the majority of the persons voting therein. In other words, the legislators can go ahead and, through a majority, adopt some form of a change. Now, when we look at it as we move forward, we have a relative rank of laws, we have the authority of the state constitutions. Okay. And this is what we did, prior to me, getting hit with that DEW weapon. Okay. Is we requested, to the governor of South Carolina, where is the authority, the authority, the constitutional authority? Where is the legislative statutory authority? Where is the county authority to convert your name from upper and lowercase to all capital letters? Okay. The Constitution, with its amendment, constitutes the supreme law of the state, and it overrides any laws enacted by the legislator which conflict therewith. Okay. So when we look at the state constitutions, I would say almost 100% of every state, okay, somewhere there is a conflict within that constitution of your unalienable rights that violate the federal constitution, okay? And when I say the federal, I also mean the organic constitution, because again, there's two, the original organic as well as the federal commercial status, because both governments coexist, okay? So now, when we look at it from the aspect of authority, okay, where in the Constitution is granting the legislative branch to convert your name into upper and lowercase into all capital letters? Okay, there's not one constitution that gives that authority that I've seen, and I've seen all 50 of them, and I've read them all, and there's not one that says, hey, the legislative branch has the ability to change your name into all capital letters, creating a commercial entity. There's not one. So again, if they don't have the authority, then it's been fraud upon you, the living man and woman, sons and daughters, all these years. Okay. Now, how do we look at it from the aspect of, should there be a law against this? Okay. Because again, remember, we have statutory laws, which are of the state. Okay. And then we have ordinances, which are of the county. Okay. How do these two work together? How do they impose areas that violate not just your due process, but violate your ability to work, to be able to choose who you contract with, to be able to know what type of education your children, your sons and daughters are receiving in public schools? Okay. How are all these things done? Okay. And why are they considered even to pass laws that take away the rights of the, father and mother? Now, Colorado had just passed a law, and this is recent. Okay, this is done here in this last week, which if your son is a man, okay, as a young boy, okay, and he wants to be a girl, and you call him a son, he or somebody around him who hears that can contact the state, and they will take that kid away from the parents. Think of what I'm saying. That's what's happened in Colorado, and vice versa with a woman or what have you. They've pushed this transgender law, statutory law, into effect. Now, that's some pretty serious stuff. I mean, when you look at it from the aspect of the rights of the family, okay? So this is where different parts of the country who are liberal, who are democratic, and even some of the areas where there are rhino Republicans that are pushing and supporting these types of laws, okay? So this is how the laws break down, okay? The United States Constitution, United States of America Constitution, is the number one supreme law of the land, period. Okay. What comes next is the statutes of the United States of America, okay, and treaties. Okay, so American Indians have treaties, and so they're supposed to come right after the Constitution. Now, many of the treaties that were initiated have been broken over all these years, okay? And so they're actually in violation of the Constitution because, again, they can't take away rights that were initiated through that Constitution. Then we have state constitutions, okay? And so the state constitutions have to be in aligned with the United States statutes and treaties and the United States Constitution. Then we have state statutes, okay? State statutes have to be in line with the state constitution, the United States statutes and treaties, and the United States Constitution. Okay, so there's a tier of what things need to be in alignment. Okay, now when we get into the county, town, and city statutes called county regulations or bylaws, okay, and towns or city ordinances or bylaws have to be in check with state statutes first, state constitutions second, the United States statutes and treaties third, and last, the United States Constitution. So they can't be in any violation of any of those. Well, when you look at it and you go around to every county, there are all sorts of violations. Okay. Example, building codes. Okay. Building codes were brought in by the United Nations. They weren't brought in by anything else. The United Nations brought in the building codes to make a unified building code to protect, to generate revenue is really what it's about, not to protect, but to generate revenue. So taxation could occur, and this revenue could be used in any way, shape, or form in a nefarious way. Okay? So think about that. How many dollars are spent on building permits? Okay? So if you own your land outright and you want to build a house out of straw, okay, we're going to go three little pigs here. And the county says, oh, no, you can't build your house out of straw. And you're like, well, why not? Straw bale homes are utilized everywhere. Why can't I do it here? Well, you just can't do it. There's reasons why. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I should be able to build my home apparently the way I choose to live in it. Because again, I don't plan on selling it. And if I do decide to sell it, the people who want to buy it are going to be informed that this is a straw bale home, and they'll either buy it or they won't buy it. But who are you to impose certain restrictions on the way I build my home? Okay. Now, let's move it a little further. If I build my home out of straw bale, okay, and I want to use an outhouse instead of hooking up to the sewage, do I have that right? Well, of course you do. Okay. There's many septic tanks and all this kind of stuff all through the South, all through the Midwest, and all through the West Coast. But cities, okay, want you to hook up to their sewage. And the reason why is the 99% of every city within every county, within every state, the highest revenue that's generated is through the sewage. Think what I'm saying, okay? Sewage, that's where they make the most money, okay? So, another area that they make a lot of money in, and this is something that most people are unaware of, okay? If you live in a town, and let's say you have a regular size lot, let's say 80 by 160 or 80 by 300, whatever the case may be where you live at, okay? Whatever size lots, pretty much uniform. And let's say you have your home and everything else is grass. You don't have a garage, outdoor garage or garage connected to your house, all that kind of stuff. And you water your lawn. Okay. Most areas will not allow you to separate the water that's being used in your home and your lawn because they want to charge you for the sewage. In some states, they'll let you put a second water meter that goes to your lawn. That way you can split the sewage amount that you're being charged for. Okay. I mean, every city should have it done that way, but they don't because again, sewage is where they make the money. It goes off of how much water is being used. Okay. So all these areas that we're looking at deal with how they're enforced, how they fine, and how they come across in an area that prevents you to actually be a free man or woman, creating an environment for your sons and daughters that allows your family to be able to live in the manner that you choose. Okay. So, wanted to touch base on that. Okay. Now, we have a very distinct system of courts. The common law rules and principles have become different in some details in various states. Okay. And this again was prior to 1934, okay, 33, when we had the Securities Act come into effect. Remember the Security Act? And that's where all the bonds came on your birth certificates, okay, where you were actually traded like chattel, okay, on the open market. So again, common law existed up until around 1967 in most cases. After 1967, every city, county, and state utilized color of law. In other words, you were guilty and you had to prove you're innocent, where common law, you were innocent until proven guilty. Okay. So, questions that we have to, take into consideration is equity. What is equity? Okay. How do we create equity within who we are, within our property, within our name, all these things, because there's a difference between equity and color of law. Okay. And so that's one of the areas that we have to be able to start moving into as we go through this decade is the area of equity. And we will touch base on equity in a couple of weeks, and we'll go through the aspect of what equity is and how we utilize equity to protect our properties and our family. Okay. So these are the questions that you should ask yourself. Okay. What is our state constitution? Okay. What is it? Have you read it? Have you gone through it and highlighted any parts of it? Okay. Does it have 6 parts, as we referred to earlier? Okay. What is the purpose of a constitutional convention and how it's assembled? What part do the voters usually take in making a new constitution? In other words, correcting the current constitution, which violates a lot of rights, versus the original intent of the state's original constitution. Do we do it through a partial amendment? In other words, do we just fix certain parts of it and leave the rest the way it is? Or do we amend the entire thing, do away with complete areas and redo it and revamp it? Okay, these are things that everybody who is, going into any type of election, any type of knowledge should be able to ask those people who are running for those types of positions. What are you going to do? What do you think about our Constitution? Okay, because most people don't ever go there. But again, if we're going to be returning back to a republic form of government, these are the things and platforms that elected officials and non-elected officials need to address. Because again, we the people are the ones who are in charge of the people who are elected. It's not the other way around. And we should be able to, within a state constitution, have a section there where if an elected official, let it be in the city, the county, or the state, is in violation of the Constitution and doesn't do what the people ask who he represents in his district, there needs to be a way that that individual gets the boot. Okay? And that needs to be in the Constitution. Okay? Now, let's look at it from a different standpoint. Can a county create their own constitution? Yes, they can, as long as it's not in conflict with the state constitution. Okay. First, it has to be non-conflict of the statutes. Okay. Then the state constitution, and then it goes all the way up to like the United States Constitution, like we talked about earlier. But you could actually create a county constitution to put all the elected officials in check. Okay. Now, the question is, how do we do it? Well, like I mentioned earlier, you get the people of the community to look at the state constitution and the statutes, put something together, bring it in on a county aspect to vote on so the people can read it and look at it and agree with it or disagree and vote. And once it's voted on, then it becomes within that county. Okay. Now, what if a law is declared, okay, again, statutes are laws, okay, unconstitutional? Is there any possibility of making it constitutional? And this is what's taken place. We have all these statutes that violate your rights, okay? I have to have a driver's license so I can travel. Okay, that violates your movement. Okay, your inability to move around. It goes against God's will that you have freedom to be able to move around. Okay, that's just one example. Think of all the others. Okay, and again, I put this out there because again, I want you people to have the time to start thinking and asking yourself questions. And then when you write those questions down, you can bring them back into this forum that we're creating here on the Ninth Amendment Party, and we can talk about it. So we can have more interaction. We can have more, why not, can we do this? Or how do we get this initiated? Okay. That's what I'm here for. Okay. I want to be able to help every community, but unless the community takes a different approach, it's hard to be able to reach out and help a community. Okay. And so when we look at ordinances, are the ordinances in your community violating any particular statute, constitution, treaty? Okay. All these things are occurring, people. Okay. Now, when we look at it from a standpoint, suppose South Carolina should add an amendment to its constitution depriving non-citizens the right to vote. Would that be a valid law? Well, of course it would be. Okay, but why hasn't it been done? Why hasn't it been done? Why hasn't it been done in every state? Because again, every state has illegal activity occurring during elections. Okay? And it goes on both sides. I mean, I grew up in a couple different states, and one state was really crooked and the other state was worse. And so I was able to grow up watching what took place because of the political arena I was raised in. So, doesn't matter if you're a Republican rhino or a hardcore Democrat, corruption in the voting process is a continuation. Okay. When we lived in Naples, Florida, and we were back in 2020, okay? And this was after 2016. We looked at, and when I say we, okay, our group, okay, of people there in Naples, very, very strong people that believed in the Constitution and the rights and the freedom of Americans, had people go and meet with very high people within the administration at that time. And when they came back in Collier County, we had over 14,000 votes that swayed the political arena in that county that were actually fraudulent. And when the individuals start talking about it, who met with the people who determined this, the feds came in and shut that person down. And when I say feds, I mean the FBI. And they said, hey, you can't talk about this. And literally shut him down. Okay. He was threatened and harassed. And even presently, he's still going through a lot of legal stuff because, again, he exposed what was happening. Okay. And this is kind of stuff happens around. I mean, look at the lady in Colorado who went to prison because she exposed the illegal and fraudulent aspects of what was taking place in Colorado. Okay. So again, we have to be able to understand if it's a valid law or if it's a violation of law. Okay. And right now, the majority of laws are in violation, just so you, each and every one of you understand that. When we look at the aspects of the contents of the state constitution, okay, we have to be able to understand that it have to be similar to ordinary statutes, and we have to be able to look at the methods of changing them if they're in violation of statutes. And we have to look at it from the aspect of how do we introduce certain initiatives to change the Constitution within the state. Okay. Now, how many new states have been formed out of old states? Okay. That's kind of an interesting thought. Okay. So when we look at it, the legislators of New York and Illinois were willing for New York City and Chicago to become separate states. And so we had a big territory, but they hadn't become states yet. Okay. But they still had a territorial constitution. These are things that we have to be able to understand as we move forward and how each state created their constitution. You know, Minnesota authorized reforested laws, including areas there that, you know, limited taxation to those areas who were doing reforests, you know, creating forests. We also look at Florida, and Florida forbids a state inheritance or income tax and exempts, you know, all types of taxation back in the early days. So, you know, today Florida doesn't have a regular tax area that, you know, like income tax that you have, you know, for as an individual. They have state taxes and things of this nature. They tax you, you know, on your home property and all these other areas, and that's changing. You know, Florida's like one of the ones that are in the forefront of saying, hey, no more property tax for anybody. Doesn't matter if you're a senior or not. Okay. And again, taxation without representation is a very serious thing that's taken place, and we have to remember that's what created our country was forms of illegal taxation. Okay. The Boston Tea Party. Okay. They were taxing our tea. We got fed up with it, so we started throwing tea overboard. You know, they tax everything. You know, we just, you know, purchased a new car. Okay. Carl and I, her old car, you know, kind of crashed and had a lifter go bad because it's a hybrid. Okay. And anybody who owns a hybrid, I'm going to tell you right now, don't buy a hybrid. Because what happens when it turns itself off and goes into the hybrid mode and it kicks back in, the oil pump that feeds the areas of the rollers, okay, your valve system, so to speak, it doesn't give it enough oil. And so sooner or later it burns out. And so most of the hybrids that are out there are having difficulty at around 120 to 160,000 miles. And they burn out the rollers, okay, and the valve train. Okay. So that's what happened with us. And so, we had a great car. I'm going to have to rebuild the motor and all that kind of stuff, which is okay. I love doing that. If you know me, I like that stuff. But so we went out and bought a new car. Okay. And we looked around and did everything, because again, I didn't want to travel and do a bunch of stuff. So we went ahead and shopped it the internet wise. We went through the internet and found what we liked, went to a dealership, seeing if I could fit in it. I fit in it good. And so we went ahead and purchased our new car. Okay. So we get our new car. Okay. We're loving our new car. Okay. And when we purchased it, we had the taxes and everything done at the dealership. And so all we would do is receive our tax paperwork and our license plate and our registration all through the mail. We didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to stand in line or do anything. So we just did it simplified. Okay. So this last week we got our our license plate. Okay. And our tax payment. Our tax payment on our new car was half of the tax payment for our property. Think of what I'm saying. We own the thing outright. Why are we paying all these taxes? Okay. These taxes do not go to the roads because the roads around here, just like they are in Walterboro and everywhere else, and around our country, the infrastructure is pretty well hammered because again, all the fraud that has been taking place, people. I mean, I don't know if any of you, looked at some of the stuff I posted on our Signal stuff, but we just had all this fraud, with the Social Security. Okay, think of this. Okay, here's the Social Security Administration. Okay, and then these crooks take this system and they mirror it and they create another system. And then they mirror that system and create another system. And so all this money that's been going in has been moved from one system to another. And we're talking billions of dollars of fraud that have been paid out to people who are dead and people who don't exist and all this stuff and back into people's hands and pockets and Democratic Party and probably some rhino Republicans as well. All this stuff has been taking place. And so how can we trust our government when it comes to taxation? It's not going to where it's meant to go. We shouldn't be paying taxes anyway. All our taxes go to the, interest rate of the Federal Reserve, which is fake money. And it basically is enslaved the entire population of our country, as well as other countries who are on the similar type of government. Okay. So we have to be more aggressive. Okay. I'm not saying screaming and yelling and throwing shit. Okay. Pardon that, but you know what I mean. We have to be more aggressive on learning and educating ourselves so we can communicate this with others. Okay. If we're not able to communicate, and this is something that has always been kind of easy for me, okay, because I grew up in business. And so I was out selling things at an early age and creating my own little dynasties here and there as I grew up and, making money and, and just selling things and doing things to make money. And so I had to be able to communicate. But at the same time, when we communicate, we have to have the ability to draw people in to understand what we are doing. Okay. When we communicate, it isn't just talking, it's to bring the questions out that people are afraid to ask. But they're willing to ask if you bring it to them. And if you bring it to them in the proper format, you'll get that feedback back. Okay. And that's where we have to do. We have to be able to, communicate this stuff to our neighbors, to our community, get more involved within the community. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing here after our elections is these new people that come in, I'm going to start going to the county meetings and start doing different things and seeing what's available to see what we can do to assist and to create some changes that are beneficial, not just to us, but to the community at large. And I think each and every one of you out there can do the same. Okay. So when we look at it from the aspect of where we're at and the things that we need to be able to do, we have to look at it from the aspect of what weakens our government. Okay. Let it be a county government, a city government, a state government, our federal government. Okay. What weakens it? Okay. And when we look at it from a standpoint of weakening, okay, making it weak, in other words, not being able to be stable, not being able to manage and take care of itself, it's who we elect. Who do we put in those county positions? Over here in Hampton County, I mean, this is a clown show, people. I mean, Carl and I just looked at a couple of things here and we're like, oh my gosh, this county council stuff here is a clown show. I mean, we just had our administrator quit, gave in his notice. He's been doing his work, and then the councilmen, they're like, no, you don't have the authority to do this. And, he has all the authority to do what he did. And, they're like, slapping him around. And he's like, you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm done. Okay. We need to be able to start at a lower area. Okay. And when I say this, look at it from a standpoint of this. Okay. All of you who are out there and know somebody that's running for a position. Okay. We have to be able to understand what type of position we're running for. And at the same time, we have to be able to have some form of background within different forms of positions. Okay. So, as an example, if you're going to be a sheriff, you should have 3 areas of knowledge. Okay. This is my belief. Okay. If you're going to be a sheriff, you should have some time dealing with people who are mentally unstable. Okay. So you should go to like a hospital that has people like that, and you should spend some time in security in a hospital to understand what mental, incapabilities are within these types of individuals. Because you're going to run across those out there in the public. There's a lot of people out there who should be in an insane asylum. Okay. I mean, personally, that's how I look at it. Okay. The second aspect, okay, is you want to be able to understand as a sheriff, okay, cultural aspects. There's a lot of different cultures, and different cultures have different ways of viewing things, and some cultures are louder than others. Okay. And just because one culture speaks louder doesn't mean that they're arguing. Okay. It doesn't mean that they're, out there doing the disturbing the peace. Okay. It's just some people talk loud. Okay. So we have to be able to understand the cultural aspect of the communities. Okay. And the third thing, which is the most important thing, is there an injured party? If there's not an injury, that person isn't going to jail, and I'm not going to put him in jail if I'm a sheriff because color of law says he broke the law. If there's not an injury, I'm not going to do it because I would be a constitutional sheriff. And the first thing that I would do is I'd let the judges know, I'd let the administration know within the community that unless there's a violent injury or an injury occurring to property, that there is no law broken. Okay. And if they didn't like that and they were in violation of that, I would go ahead and arrest those individuals and throw them in jail for violating the Constitution. Okay. If I was a sheriff, and who knows, I might run for sheriff next time. Who knows, Carla? I kind of chuckle about it. You never know. Okay. These are things that we have to be able to address, and we have to be able to look at it from every aspect. Counsel people. Okay. You should understand the educational system. You should understand water and waste. Okay. Because again, there's a lot of money in water and waste. Garbage, a lot of money in garbage. Okay. Growth. Okay. And when I say growth, I don't mean growth as in the United Nations, quote, quote, air quotes here, sustainable growth, because again, that's United Nations talking. Okay. I'm talking growth within a community due to the fact that the community is working together to bring in new work. Okay. New construction jobs, new whatever it may be. Okay. So these are things that we have to take into consideration. And one of the things that, I got here just the other day, because again, I'm looking at all these different aspects of what's happened here in South Carolina. Okay. I'm kind of becoming a historian of South Carolina, which is really neat because I've done the West Coast, I've done the mid section of the United States, I've done Florida, all these different places. And now we're in South Carolina. And agriculture has always been one of my curiosities. Okay. And so I got this new book. Okay. It's called South Carolina. Okay. And it deals strictly with agriculture. Okay. And it was made by the Department of Agriculture and Commerce, and it was done out of the Clemson College, 1927. Okay. And this book has some incredible stuff talking about what used to grow here in South Carolina. Okay. And why a lot of this stuff here that's, in South Carolina isn't here anymore. One of the things that I think should take place here in South Carolina as we move forward and we start all becoming more of an industrial state again, okay, is the fact that, we should have some more textile companies in our state. Our state had a lot of textile companies at one time, making clothes, making bags, making all sorts of stuff. Okay. The way a state becomes wealthy is to utilize the agricultural industry and create every aspect of that agricultural industry, from the ground to the packing to the distribution to everything. And if a state doesn't have that, it doesn't grow. It doesn't make money. Okay. Agricultural states, we've lost many of the states in our nation due to corruption within our government, due to the fact that we let Mexico come in with all their products, other countries with all their products, South America, all this stuff. And we farmed out about 85%. Florida at one time, I think I read somewhere and I was told that they produced almost 90% of X amount of fruit and products that we would use in our country. And now it's down to like 5%. Okay. Look at California. Okay. California used to produce a huge amount, and then they turned the water off, and all these farmers they couldn't grow anything because they turned the water off. Taking care of agriculture should be one of our number one concerns in every state. The reason why is militarily why. Okay. If we can't sustain our people and feed our people, and we rely on other countries, then we're not a secure country. Okay. Trump knows this. Things are changing. And that's where we have to be able to go ahead and look at our communities and say, hey, if something happened, how is our community going to sustain itself? Okay. Do we have enough food in our community that we grow here locally that can sustain our community or help other communities? Can you do that in Barnwell? Can you do that here in Hampton? Can you do that, in Allendale? Can you do that? Where are you able to do that at? These are questions that elected officials should be asked. These are questions that everybody should know and should be concerned. Okay? Why do we, the people, require an agency, okay, FEMA, to come into our community to help us? Why? It's because it's been farmed out so that the money that FEMA gets could be used for nefarious things. We should be able to take care of our communities without FEMA, without federal funding, without all these aspects. Okay. The question is again, is there enough to take care of an entire community? Okay. As an American Indian, okay, as an American Indian people, my grandparents, my great grandparents, okay, we were raised to have food set aside for emergencies. And when I say food, I mean, I'm talking as our community, as our tribe. So when we look at our homes in the rocks, okay, our little adobe homes that were on cliffs, okay, we had storage places like silos basically in different locations on these cliffs. So if hard times came upon us, floods, famine, whatever the case may be, we still had enough food to survive. And almost every tribe had that. Okay. Almost every tribe worked that way. Okay. When we look at food and we look at canning and we look at all these areas, okay, we have to have that ability to be self sustainable, period, in our communities. So we need to be able to look at that. Those are things that we should be addressing. We're not. Most communities aren't addressing that. Okay. And very few religious groups address it. Okay. Just so you know, very few. They might have warehouses for food to help the homeless people or people who are economically deprived or this or that. But do they have actual food? Because a lot of that stuff in cans isn't food. It's just subsistence stuff to get you through, but it ain't going to help you. It ain't going to nourish you. These are things that we should be asking our community. We should be asking all these things. Okay. So those are things that weaken government. Okay. Now, as we move forward and we look at different aspects of, life and municipalities and all these areas of education, things are at a apex and they're changing. Remember, okay, and this is something that's going to be hard for everybody, okay? It's hard for a lot of people, and when I tell people this, they just like, bah humbug, All the stuff that's going on behind the scenes that we want to know about, we're only going to get maybe 2%, 3%, 5% of really what's happening. That's all we're going to get, like it or not. We're not going to know everything. 2%, 3%, 5% at most. And the reason why is because if they gave you the 95%, there'd be so much chaos in the streets right now that we wouldn't have a nation. We wouldn't have a world because it'd be all over. Every country would be like, what the frick is going on? Okay. So don't get stressed out, people. Don't let the ego, okay, that male energy, because that's in both men and women, that male energy of the ego, okay. Women don't have an ego, okay, on the woman's side of our energy. We don't have that ego. It's the male energy that's the ego, okay, on the woman's side. But she gets a little tough. It's that energy, okay? And vice versa. Same with us as men, okay? When we get that way, it's our ego. We're not going to be able to know everything that's transpiring. We're not, okay? And if you're listening to all these other individuals out on social media saying, oh, yeah, this is going to take place on this date and this is going to take place on that date, I'm going to say right out, that's a bunch of bullshit. Okay. Very few people know any dates. The only people who know the dates is the military. That we know. Okay. That I can confirm. But as far as the rest of us, we don't know. We don't. All we can go by is what we've seen, what we can determine, who we communicate that are high up in different areas of what's happening. Okay. But we still don't know. Okay. Like I talk to Charlie Ward every now and then. And me and Charlie, we'll talk. And he's like, man, BT, I just, I know this is happening, but I don't have any evidence of it, but I know it's happening. I talk to people that are in these different areas and they know it's happening because of what's transpiring as it's happening. But we don't know the end date of this movie. Okay. We don't know the end date of the reevaluation of currencies. Okay. We all know it's close, but we've been saying it's close for a lot of years, people, because we don't know. We don't know exactly how it's going to take place. Okay. We don't know exactly how the banking system is going to be converted. We know that there's two systems operating side by side. That we know. That we can prove. Okay. But we can't prove when they're going to pull the switch. We don't know that. Okay. We know that they're in conjunction working together side by side, but we don't know when that switch is going to be pulled. We know that Iran is a way to break the economic stability of not just Britain, but also of China. We know that. Because without oil, China can't do much and Britain can't do much. Okay. Remember when Trump said, hey, if you guys want some oil, get up off your butt and go over there and get it. Gotta love Trump. Okay. Gotta love it. But did any of them go up there and do that? No. See? Because they're part of the problem. Okay. See, China was working towards creating their money market, their dollar, to be the dollar that was going to be used globally. And if the deep state and the elite had it their way, which they were part of it, Britain was part of that, then that would dump our country and put us in a windfall of chaos and destroy us. But it didn't happen. The reason it didn't happen is because God has won this battle and has placed the right people in certain positions in our country to help us override and overcome this satanic pedophile group of reptilians. Okay. No different than, our our British king. When I say our, okay, like because he's a pirate, he's a freaking reptilian. I mean, if you do the research, okay, Princess Diane even came out and said she caught him in a satanic ritual as they were all reptilian, and she caught him, and she was going to go public, and she did go public on some of it. And shortly after that, they took her away, and all of a sudden, somebody was killed in the tunnel. Okay. Hard to eat, hard food to take in because, again, everything that has taken place in our country for the last, since 2016 minimum, okay, has been to put us in this position as we continue down this decade of the most important decade in the history of mankind and womankind, spirituality in every aspect. This is the true decade of the golden age coming to form that creation has talked about since the beginning of time. Okay. Don't look for somebody coming in the clouds. Okay. The clouds are inside you already. He's inside you. You don't have to look, he's inside you. Okay. Can you handle that? Can you realize that you are in his image? Okay. We have the ability to manifest and create and to do these things because God gave us that ability. When you manifest, if you manifest and you think, keep a minimum, okay? And you'll see some changes in what you're creating. Okay? If you're wanting change, keep a minimum of that thought for 17 seconds. 17 seconds. That's all it takes. 17 seconds. Okay? And when I say that, there has been studies on the mind when people manifest and create, and that's a timeline. When people hold that thought for at least 17 seconds or more, okay, I like to do more because, again, when I manifest and Carla manifests, we're getting into some serious manifestation. So we really lock it in. You know, we're talking 20 minutes at sometimes, 30 minutes, hours, okay? When we go into prayer, we do the same thing. We're manifesting, we're giving gratitude for receiving, you know? It isn't about, hey, I threw it out there and nothing ever happened. No, it's about creating manifestation through the knowledge that Spirit has given each and every one of us to do what we are meant to do, knowing that faith is of the knowing and belief is through the education. Okay. And they're a totally separate energy. So it's getting to be about 8:42. We've got about an hour and 20 minutes, a little bit longer than normal, but hey, it's all good. Each and every one of you have the ability to change your life, your community, your environment, everything. Okay. I mean, not everything takes money, but if you manifest, your money will come to you. And it might not come to you in the way you think. Okay. As an example, okay, I'm going to go on just a little bit more because, I guess I'm on the preaching mode here. I'm up on my old puppet. Okay. So a long time ago, when I was on the road and I would do my seminars, okay, I would just ask for donations. People just donate. Hey, BT's coming into town. Let's get him some money so he can continue his traveling and bless him. And that's what took place. And so I was working, because it was work, okay? Spirituality is work, okay? It ain't, you know, that's something that a lot of people have difficulty understanding. When you're really working with spirit, it's work. It ain't like a part-time job, it's work, okay? Because again, when you're working in spirit, it takes more energy than it does on the physical form because you're utilizing both the physical form and the spiritual form of your identity and your interaction within all the dimensions known to us. Okay. And some people have multiple dimensions that they can move in, and some are still on just the 3D dimension. Okay. And that's okay. But as you're doing this, okay, and I was traveling, I had a seminar that I was putting on. And this gal's like, I want to be able to donate, but only thing I got is this violin. And I'm like, a violin? And she's like, yeah, I got this acoustic violin. It's got all pearl engraved in it. I mean, this thing was a Fender violin and it was bad. I mean, when I say bad, I mean like awesome, like crazy cool. I don't know how to play a violin. Okay. And so I says, yeah, you can give me that if that's what you want to do. Go ahead. Okay. So she gives it to me. About 3 weeks go by, and I get a call from a friend of mine. And he says, hey, BT, what's going on? And these people don't know each other. This is like stayed away from another couple of states. These people have no knowledge of each other whatsoever. Okay. And I'm like, oh, I'm not doing much. Just got back into town. I said, what's going on? He goes, man, my daughter's doing really well in her violin class. And they're moving into the acoustic violin. And I'm trying to find an acoustic violin. And I says to him, I says, well, I just happen to have one. He's like, BT, you're so full of crap. That's what he said, jokingly. He says, no, you don't even know how to play a violin. What would you be doing with a violin? And I said, hey, when did you put it out there that you needed an acoustic violin? He says, oh, a few weeks ago. I said, okay, well, I have one. He goes, send me a picture. So I sent him a picture of this Fender acoustic violin. Okay. Come to find out it's like a $1,200, $1,500 violin. All right. That's what it was. So I sent it to him and he calls me on the phone as soon as he got the pictures. He's like, dude, do you really have this? I'm like, yeah, it's sitting right here. He goes, how much you want for it? I says, I don't know. What do you think it's worth? I says, I know what it's worth, but what do you think it's worth? He's like, man, I just don't have a lot of money right now because I'm taking care of my daughter and blah, blah, blah. And I says, okay. I said, what do you got to trade? Okay. And so my friend, he makes didgeridoos. Now, I don't know if y'all know what a didgeridoo is, okay, but it's a basically like a trumpet, but it's made out of wood and it's made a certain way. And the didgeridoos come out of Australia, okay? And so the Aborigine tribes of Australia are the ones who invented the didgeridoo. And other tribes have something similar, but the real didgeridoo comes from Australia. And so he sends me his website. And I knew he made these, and I've always wanted one. And so he sends me to his website and he goes, pick any one you want. I says, really? Okay. Hey, you're going to give me that much of an opportunity. I'm going to see the one I like, right? So I go through it and I see this one that's made out of black walnut and it's got white oak on the tip of it for the mouthpiece. And I'm like, man, that thing is bad looking. This thing here could sound really good. And I says, hey, I like this one here. And he goes, BT. He goes, that's my favorite one at all. I use that at all the festivals I go to. I says, hey, you said pick any one, and this is the one that I like. He says, okay. He says, I'll tell you what I'll do. He says, I'll come down to where you're at, and I'll bring a bunch of other didgeridoos, and I'll bring that one too. But you might like some other ones better. I said, don't bother. I said, just bring the one. Don't do it. Okay. So the next day he shows up. I mean, man, and he was like 300 and some miles away from where I was at. Okay. Just so you guys know. Okay. So he's jumping on this, man. He knows BT's got this acoustic violin. He's jumping in on this. Boom. Knock at my door. And here he is. Okay. I'm like, what's up, Barry? And he's like, hey, I got the didgeries. I said, I just need that one, that walnut, black walnut one with the white oak tip, mouthpiece. And he's like, oh, I brought you some other ones. So he goes out to his car and he starts bringing in all these didgeries. I mean, like four, five, six. I mean, the next thing I knew, I had like almost a dozen didgeries in the house. And I'm like, where's the black one? Where's the black walnut one? He goes, oh, it's still in the car. I said, why don't you just take all these back out? Because I don't want any of these. I just want the black walnut one. That's the one that I liked. He goes, are you sure? You haven't even heard them sound. So he starts picking them, and didgeries are like, they make some pretty cool sounds. Okay. Anyway, so he starts playing them, and I'm like, no, no, just go get the other one. So he goes out and he's like sad, he's like walking out, he's putting it out there and takes all of his didgeries back in and comes back with the black walnut one. Okay. And he brings it in and he unveils it and he goes, man, I'm going to miss this. I said, well, anytime I'm in the area, I'll have it with me and you can play it. So we made the trade. Okay. He manifested it and created it within like 2 weeks. Okay. Because he went to one of our manifestation courses. Okay. That we kicked on. Okay. And he took some of our knowledge with some of his knowledge and other people who have been training him over the years. And he was able to learn how to manifest. I get a call from him about 2 weeks later after he got back home, and he says, "You know what, BT?" He says, "I'm glad I gave you that black walnut." He says, "Even though that was my favorite one," he says, "I'm really glad." He says, "Because you should see the stars in my daughter's eyes when I brought that to her." Okay, so over here in this corner, up against the wall, you can see the white oak tip and the black walnut nose to that didgeridoo that I got right there. Okay. Manifestation, creation, all of us have that ability to do it. And it's not always going to come from who you think it's going to come from, money wise, trade wise. Okay. Now, since I've had that, I've had several people want to buy that from me and want to buy it way more than what the violin was worth because they know who made it. Okay. And it's not for sale. It's not for sale. Now, if somebody came up to me and Spirit said, BT, they're the ones that are supposed to have it, I'd let it go. Okay. We have to have that ability to recognize within ourselves that when we create, we don't own it. We're just stewards of it. Okay. All the cars we have, all my antique trucks and cars, and I'm just a steward. All the stuff in here, I'm just a steward. Okay. Because there's going to be a day that somebody else is going to be the steward of all this stuff. And they're going to manifest it. And they're going to manifest saying one day, I wish I had this, I wish I had that. And when that day comes, they'll get it. Just like each and every one of you, okay? Don't let your financial situation create chaos in your life due to the fact that you either overspent, due to the fact that you felt you never was worth anything, due to the fact that, your family mistreated you, people mistreated you, life mistreated you. I've had everything. I've lost everything. I've had everything. I've lost everything. And now I have everything again. Okay. It's all because that's how spirit works. Sometimes spirit knocks us down so we can move up and appreciate what we have. Okay. And so the main things that I appreciate today is my faith, my family, and my education. Those are the three things. Without my faith, I know I would never have met Carla. And without Carla, I know my education wouldn't have continued the way it has because she's been so supportive. And I know my education, as it continues, isn't just about me, it's about me helping others. And that's all I can wish for each and every one of you. Okay. So, to Mr. Hamp, amen to that, my brother. and just one of those things that we go with. Okay, so like I always do, if anybody has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and open it up. We only got a few people here tonight, which is okay with me. Those who are meant to be here. Bonnie, do you have any questions on anything that we talked about tonight?
No, I just want to say that was deep. That was a deep one there.
Well, sometimes we got to dig deep to get on top of things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So anyway, well, I thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate it. We love you, girl.
All right.
All right. And number 825622. Any questions?
That's Tammy.
Yeah, I figured that's who it was. No questions there, 825622, Miss Tammy? Nope. Okay.
Trying to make it work. No,
Oh,
I'm good. If
okay.
I could remember my question from the last time, I'd ask that, but right now I don't know what it is.
Uh-oh. Well, I always tell people write them down and bring them back, even if it's, way back when in the beginning and all of a sudden you remember, always, feel free to bring a
All
question in.
right.
Okay.
I
Thanks.
will.
Miss Bobby, any questions? I think Miss Bobby's good then. Mr. TB, any questions? Mr. Thomas, any questions?
For tonight, what's arriving to me is a question that I find myself asking myself. Maybe not necessarily a question that there's an answer to, and that is how to continue to proceed. Is it going to be in our lifetime? Is it even going to be in the next 10, 20 years? What is it even that might or might not be at what time, maybe, while I'm still alive? So we have these things that we feel are happening, like you've expressed again tonight and many other times, yet we really have no idea exactly what's happening or especially when, like if it's in this lifetime of ours. So and sometimes I find myself, what do I do now or soon? And maybe there's not really a time or a rush to do a certain thing. So just this kind of question of the when, of the timing of things.
I always tell people, okay, if you're feeling moved to do it, do it. Okay, don't wait. Okay, and again, remember what I touched base on earlier. Okay, the ego's going to confuse you. Okay, the ego's going to go like, "Hey, hurry up and get your shit done," or you need to do this, you need to do that. Okay, but okay, the spirit will open the door, and you'll automatically know that you need to do it. You follow me? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so when the spirit opens that door, walk through that door and get whatever you need to do accomplished. And don't hesitate, don't put it off. Walk right through it and get your stuff done because we only have so much time. And in our tradition, those doors are only opened X amount of times in our lifetime. My grandfather always used to say, opportunity only knocks three times. What you do with opportunity will determine if opportunity ever comes back. Okay? So again, open that door opens, go through it, buddy. Don't hesitate, you know, jump on it and ride the wave, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Ride the wave. I'm drinking some cacao tonight. Just
Oh,
want everybody to know, I'm having a little bit of my chocolate, which is really
uh-huh.
good, and it's good healthiness for your body and just ride that wave. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All
Thanks for
right.
being on it with us.
Hey, no problem, Thomas. We love you. Our best to you. Mr. Hamp, any questions?
Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you, Mr. Hamp.
Okay, no questions. We I appreciate you, sir, for everything you do. Thank you. God
Thank,
bless.
thank you, Hap. I appreciate your time too. Well, people, again, it's almost 9 o'clock. It's a great day to be alive. It's a great month to be alive. Remember, we got the full moon tomorrow. And if I can suggest to anybody out there, okay, in our tradition, the moon cycle is very important when it comes to creating things, okay? Because again, after the full moon is what? The new moon, okay? It's the start of a new energy. And so you want to end your old energy with new energy. And so tomorrow, I believe the full moon's at like 7 something PM, if I remember right. Let me do a double check here to make sure. I don't want to give you guys the wrong time. Okay. Yeah, so right around 7:40 something, 7:30 something in the PM. Okay, that's when the full moon starts. Okay. And in my lifetime, when I do my manifestation and our creation on the full moon energy, as the new moon energy comes in, it creates almost like a tornado effect. It gets that energy moving and it brings things to you. Okay. So for those of you who are out there, be specific on what you are looking to accomplish. Okay. Now, the question that you always have to remember, okay, is it in your timing or is it in God's timing? Because just because you've created it and you've manifested it, okay, if God feels it's not in your timing or in the highest good for you, it's going to wait until that opportunity comes where you're able to accept everything. Okay. And that's a hard thing for us to do when we do prayer. But if you're willing and you're in the right energy, then Spirit will bring you that quickly. So don't ask for anything. Just give gratitude for receiving what you want to receive. Okay. Let it be what you need or whatever. Okay. Or for somebody else. So some of the best manifestation that we've had in our lifetime, and even with working with Carla, when we both are manifesting the same energies, okay, creating that is for our neighbors, our friends, our family, okay? Because when you create, if you're just creating for yourself and you're leaving others out, it doesn't manifest as easy. It happens, but it doesn't come as easy. And so when we manifest, we normally manifest for ourselves, but we also manifest for others, okay? Just so you know that, okay? Try that on this next full moon. And one of the funniest things, okay, because we got May. May's got 2 full moons. We got it on the 1st and we got it on the 31st, which is very unusual, just so you know. So you have 2 chances in May to help create what you're trying to work towards and what you're doing in that creation manifestation. And then come June, okay, we have a full moon on my birthday, just so everybody knows. Okay. The full moon on June is on my birthday on June 29th. Okay. And it's a strawberry moon. That's what they refer to it at. Okay. I always say strawberry fields are forever. Okay. Anytime I hear strawberry, okay, kind of like the song.
That the same
Always,
thing as the blood moon?
uh, I believe it is the one coming up tomorrow. And then the one on the 31st is the blue moon. Okay. And so that's where we're at on those energies. But again, creation, manifestation, nature, what God has provided, what Christ consciousness has provided, all these energies of ascended masters and people of the universe who have been given knowledge all utilize what we are surrounded by to help create and manifest. Okay. So again, 9:04, another great day. God bless, Godspeed, God bless America. BT, ninthamendmentparty.com, and we sign out.